thank you all for being here and sharing this important information that we're going to go over today with your friends and colleagues, as well as those in our membership who may be watching the video of this later on. It's a really important discussion point that was brought up both by the board of directors and our commission leadership this year. And we were lucky enough to have two wonderful folks who can actually come and address these issues and share some really good and useful information about interacting with AI. Before we get fully started, I want to take this moment to acknowledge the land where USITT is based in Onondaga County. These places are home to centuries of stories, families, communities, music, dance and art, movement and migration from the Onondaga and the Haudenosaunee nations who call this place home long before history was written down. North America is comprised of more than 500 nations, communities, and indigenous groups who have called this continent their home for thousands of years. They strive to care for the land and live in harmony with it as a core tenet of the various belief systems found across the continent. We honor these people for their care and stewardship and also recognize the very difficult history of occupation and colonization that has often torn these communities apart. Members of USITT urge you to find out more about the land you now call home and care for it with equal vigor. Please visit nativeland.ca, and we'll put that in the chat, to find out more and consider what you can do to educate yourself and others about the land. This is also November, which is the month recognizing the American Indian heritage. So it's a great time to do some more of that research into your own area. We have two wonderful folks who have given of their time and great knowledge and expertise with us today. Shawn Helms, who is an attorney and a partner and head of the McDermott Technology and Outsourcing Practice, coming to us live from Dallas, Texas. Shawn has broad experience in the areas of information technology, outsourcing, blockchain, artificial intelligence, and telecommunications. He's also authored several books and reports on some of the legal issues around AI and technology, and had a connection with one of our folks that goes from long before being involved in this particular area of the law, that was a commissioner who recommended him to us, and we're really, really grateful. So thank you for being here with us today, Shawn.
Of course.
We also have designer Jason Jamerson, who is an American scenic and production designer. His work regularly appears in film, television, off-Broadway, on-Broadway, regional theaters across the country. Jason also is presenting at the USITT conference and Stage Expo in March of 2024 on this very topic, and was a real leader with our tech production and our scenic design commission last year in a session that this will be a second part of this year. So thanks for being here, Jason, to help with this conversation.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn this over to Shawn to start, who's going to give us some background, some of which is clarifying, some of which is terrifying, but I think all good for us to learn. So Shawn, take it away.
Great. Great, Laura Lee, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you to everyone who's attending. I'm very pleased to be talking to you today. As was said, my name is Shawn Helms. I am a partner at the law firm McDermott, Will & Emery. My entire career has been spent in the technology space, and now, the joke I like to make here is that I have to remind people that I do more than just artificial intelligence, because it's kind of all I've talked about in the past 12 months, for better or worse. It really, I think with the advent of ChatGPT, it really sort of democratized the artificial intelligence space in a way that sort of captured the imagination of a lot of people. And these generative AI tools have certainly done that. I'd like to start out with a little bit of history, and that is in 1988, I bought my first computer. It was this computer right here, the Tandy Color Computer 3. I went down to my local bank and I got a loan, and I took the check and I went to Radio Shack, and I bought this computer and spent my entire childhood learning how to run it. And, you know, I have built my entire career off of information technology. This is some areas that I do a lot of work in, but, you know, I have to say this particular topic has really been one that has expanded the people that want to hear me speak a lot broader than I could have ever imagined. Let's talk about information technology generally. And I think sort of the right way to start this conversation is to think about what has happened in terms of the distribution of information technology in the world. And this all really starts with the printing press. And it was really the start of the information age. And if you look at what happened after that, where all these pieces of technology have enabled more and more communication across the world. So the telegraph, the telephone, the radio, television, the mobile phone, these were leaps in terms of people being able to communicate with each other, to entertain each other, to interact with each other. And then came the modern information age. And I've started the modern information age at the development of the personal computer. And then there's all these sort of key milestones in the modern information age, including, you know, broadband internet, the first mobile phone, the World Wide Web. And, you know, of course, the internet changed everything. There's very little of your daily life that doesn't involve interaction with the internet in some meaningful way, right? If you're on your mobile phone, if you're, you know, attending the webinar, anything that you do, every email you send, there's a high probability that you have appliances in your house that are hooked up to the internet. I mean, it has permeated our lives in a way that I don't think anyone could have ever imagined, given that the internet wasn't even around when I was a kid. So what are the technologies that will be as pervasive as the internet? I've had experts argue that it might be blockchain, might be metaverse, but I really think it's artificial intelligence. And there's so much AI that is around you today that you may not even be aware of, but if you purchased a car in the last 3 or 4 years, you have artificial intelligence built into that car, and not just electric cars, all cars. If you are wearing an Apple Watch on your mobile phone, it is all around you in ways that you may not even recognize. So, what is AI? Well, artificial intelligence is really computers that are processing information much like humans. And, you know, I have been predicting an inflection point in artificial intelligence for 10 years. And I've been wrong for 9 of the 10. But I think this is really the year. And, you know, what I will say is, I remember the first time utilizing one of these generative AI tools. And it was a moment that took me back to the first time I played an MP3 file, where it was this tiny little file and you clicked on it and it had a real song. And the first time I opened a web browser, and the first time I used an iPhone, it was really just like an aha moment. And the first time I used ChatGPT, I had that same moment again. And I really felt like this is going to change everything. And it has really captured attention in a way that I think has brought everyone into the fold to really consider how AI could impact our jobs, our personal lives, everything we do. So what is AI? Well, there are a lot of different definitions of what artificial intelligence is. And this is a bit of a slide that sort of overlays some buzzwords and technologies and sort of gives you a bit of the ecosystem of what artificial intelligence is. But it's really computers that are able to process data and information that looks a lot like human intelligence. And AI can learn, it can understand, it can draw connections. There are lots of examples of AI. So if you have an Alexa in your house and it's able to recognize that sort of spoken language, that is a type of artificial intelligence. When you're typing on your smartphone and it suggests the next word that you might want to put in a text, that is a predictive artificial intelligence, and is coincidentally the technology or an element of the technology that these large language models like ChatGPT are utilizing. But there's lots and lots of examples of AI. There's what I call traditional AI and then generative AI. And I want to draw this distinction because it's important. We are for the rest of our presentation today going to be talking about generative artificial intelligence. But it's important to remember that we've always had traditional AI, sort of calculations, predictions, where a computer takes a data set and it categorizes information or makes certain predictions about outcomes. And that sort of traditional AI is really the providence of the data geeks. And so, your parents, for example, would have probably not known much or certainly not dealt with sort of traditional AI, but they may ask about Stable Diffusion or ChatGPT or they have certainly heard about these technologies that when you type in a brief prompt, you get this human-like output. And the human-like output is really what I think has made this take off, because everyone can understand this output, as opposed to, there's a 93% chance that XYZ category type will come out of this, which was really sort of the providence of people that were technology or data analysts. There's lots of types of generative AI. I'm not going to spend any time on this slide. The slide's also outdated because it was only made a few months ago, but there's a lot of different products now and ones that should probably come off the list because it looks like they're not going to be winners in the process. One thing I want to mention here is that if we try to look into our crystal ball and predict where this is going to go, there's a high probability we're not going to get it right. And our crystal ball is certainly cloudy. I remember I was at a technology conference about 6 years ago, and there was a futurist up on stage. And they were asking, he was sort of talking about how artificial intelligence is going to take over all our jobs. And this relatively meek lady in the audience sort of raised her hand, and they brought the microphone over to her. And she said, "My daughter's getting ready to start college. What do I tell her to major in? All of this makes me very nervous." And he very boldly and confidently said, "Tell her to be an artist, because a computer will never be able to create like the human mind." Well, we didn't exactly get that right. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is generative AI that creates images. And lo and behold, a computer actually can do a pretty good job of mimicking human creativity in some very amazing ways. And so, I bring up this point because I think the smartest people in the world are not going to be able to predict where this technology goes. Are we ready for where it'll take us? Well, I know there are billions upon billions of dollars being poured into artificial intelligence by companies around the world. And the companies on the screen are in many ways leading the way, and they are dumping literally tens of billions of dollars into this tech. And so we are not going to be able to get away from it. So putting your head in the sand on these issues will do you no good. Because generative AI, for example, is going to be built into Word and PowerPoint and Outlook and Excel and all Adobe, all the productivity tools that are used in the business world or the creative world will have generative AI in them. You may have heard of ChatGPT. I'm going to spend just a moment on this. It is a pretty amazing tool where you type in a brief prompt, and you get some pretty amazing human-like textual output. So while it's amazing, I'll also say it's amazingly wrong. One of the questions I asked ChatGPT was, who are some famous people that went to William Jewell College, which is the little liberal arts school I went to in Missouri. And ChatGPT very confidently came back and said, William Jewell College is a private liberal arts college located in Liberty, Missouri. It's had many successful alumni, including the following. And it went to list off these 10 luminaries, Walt Disney, President Truman. None of these people went to William Jewell College. And so it lies with confidence in a way that if you are not careful and you rely on the technology, it could be bad. And, do I think these type of what are called hallucinations get better over time? They will. But the fundamental aspects of these technology make them where they draw connections and relations and can give you output that is completely inaccurate. There are also images that can be created, as well as video, sound recordings. All of these things are possible. And so if you typed into Stable Diffusion, for example, a cute blue puppy floating on a cloud of pink cotton candy, you might get an image that looks like the following. So how do we deal with this? Well, I think in large part, you don't try to stop it. You're not going to be able to uninvent anything. You do need to try to carefully steer it and understand it. And so we're advising a lot of organizations about, here are the risks. There's content risk, there's intellectual property risk, there's technology risk, there's data privacy, security, legal compliance, reputational issues, organizational risk. And I'm not going to have time to delve into each one of these, but all these are things that you have to think about. And I think understanding and taking those into account as you're using the tech is important. I'm going to skip over what I will note is on the content risk, not only are there the hallucinations I talked about, it could also just be bias or discrimination. There can be reliability issues, consistency issues, an inability to explain the outcome. You may have people that have wrong expectations on the technology, that they believe it'll be able to do certain things that it's just not able to do. I've had a number of my colleagues come to me and say, should we be worried that a product like ChatGPT is going to make contract drafters or lawyers irrelevant in the world? Well, my experience is no, that's not the case. And people feel like this technology is just come upon us quickly, but people forget, it took OpenAI 8 years to create the current version of ChatGPT. It's not like this just sprung upon us. And I think the development is going to be slower than people think. There's obviously technology risks anytime that you implement new technology, and this is no different. We're telling people to basically do 3 things. 1, put in place a policy. 2, have an overall AI governance framework within your organization. And 3, think about your third-party contracts, because you're going to be buying technology and using and implementing it within your companies. And those products may have AI in them. And so what are the terms you need to put to ensure that those third-party products don't create a problem for you? I'm going to talk about intellectual property issues, because this is probably the most important point for creatives, and it's a really important legal point for everyone to carefully consider. And that is, under the United States Constitution and the Copyright Act, if it is a work that would otherwise be protectable under copyright, it is not protectable if it does not have an element of creativity that comes from the human mind. And we know this is the case. It was a Supreme Court case many years ago where the Supreme Court had the information, and a telephone book is not protectable by copyright. And the reason is it didn't have the modicum of creativity needed to allow it to have that monopoly of copyright protection. There was also a case in 2015 brought by PETA, and it was over this picture of the monkey at the right. And the monkey had taken a selfie from a camera that was set up by a naturalist. And PETA, and it became a meme on the internet, and PETA brought a lawsuit against the photographer and said, actually, the monkey owns the copyright to that picture, and all the money that you have received from licensing the image should go to the monkey. And we, PETA, because we're good people, we will gather up all that money and we will give it to the monkeys. And the courts heard this and said, well, no, it doesn't work like that, because there actually is no copyright protection off that picture of the monkey, because the monkey is the one that pushed the button on the camera. And because of that, it cannot be protected by copyright, because it's not the creativity of the human mind. That same concept has now been applied to artificial intelligence, where the United States Copyright Office and now a federal court has said that artificial intelligence output that would otherwise be protected by copyright is not protectable, because it's not the creativity of the human mind. And so all these images and textual output from generative AI are not protectable under copyright law in the United States. Now, that is not true everywhere. It is protectable in the UK, it is protectable in Ireland, it is protectable in a few other places. But under today's United States copyright law, it is not protectable. The same thing is true of a patent, by the way. If AI helps in the invention of patentable object or embodiment, it is not an inventor under patent law. It must be a, quote, natural person for purposes of patent rights. So how do we deal with this? Well, we don't know where the line is for copyright protection, at least not today. What we know is if it's 100% created by AI, it's not protectable. If it's 100% created by a human, it is protectable. But where's the line? How much interactivity does a human have to make an element protectable, or to make an image protectable, or a story protectable? We don't know where that line is today. We have already had a federal court rule that an image that was created and then heavily modified by a human artist is not protectable, but that the portions of the image that were modified by the human artist would be, but the entirety of the image, and certainly the underlying aspects that started out with artificial intelligence, are not protectable by copyright. So I'm gonna wrap up my piece here, turn it over to Jason, but then I'll be available to answer any questions. I'll just note, like, is this good or bad? And people ask me all the time, they're like, hey, Shawn, you're thinking about this, all the time. What do you think about this? Is this a bad thing? Is this a great thing? And I sort of put the two opposite ends of the spectrum. Are you a Luddite looking to sort of, destroy this technology because you think it's the worst thing ever? Or are you a technology optimist? You think, oh, well, this is great. Technology in general has advanced human society, and this is just another positive element, and we should embrace it. And I think there are arguments that can be made either way. Certainly, there will be an adjustment period. I tend to think about this like an economist, and that is, technology is the one thing that pushes our supply curve to the right, increases resources in the world, and could be helpful. I think the other thing to note is it kind of doesn't matter whether we think it's good or bad. It's here, and you can't uninvent anything. And so the question is, how do we as organizations deal with this? And certainly as creatives and entertainers, what's the right way to think about it and deal with it? If you're interested in sort of the legal elements of this, AI Loss Mentor.com is a resource we have at our law firm. I lead a 52 lawyer cross practice group that is looking at AI issues on a regular basis. So that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Shawn. This was really, really helpful. And I'm only sorry we weren't all able to be on screen to laugh and giggle at various moments that were very entertaining and funny. And we'll come back around to you when we get to the questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Jason, and I'm going to remind everybody in the room that if you've got questions as we go, this is for you. So pop them in the Q&A as they come up, and we will get to them and answer them. And so Jason, take it away in terms of the next layer of this conversation. Oh, you're muted.
There we go. Let me mess up right away.
There we go.
Can you guys see my slideshow here? If I do that?
Yes, now we can. There we go.
All
Beautiful.
right, cool. I've lost you, but that's all right. We'll survive. 1 second.
We're in tiny screens on the side.
Yeah. There we go. So yeah, if you happen to see my presentation at the previous convention, I was talking about how exactly what Shawn was talking about, how AI image generation and generative AI has come out of nowhere, has exploded in its capabilities. And basically, I wanted to talk about how it's useful to theater practitioners and designers. And at that time, how it was useful is in all the ways that we use images. When I first started being a designer, we would cut up magazines and make our own scrapbooks and collect printed photos from wherever we could because we wanted to borrow visual ideas. Well, when I gave that presentation at the previous convention, that was exactly how AI had empowered us, because if you can see this costume, I'll call it a concept art sketch. It was generated by an early version of Midjourney. And it's incredibly helpful to be able to synthesize ideas. So this was generated by putting in the Great Wave and the Tempest and costumes and historical Japanese clothing. And so being able to synthesize ideas into image generation far beyond my abilities to paint or draw these things, and certainly at 1/100th of the time, is incredibly, incredibly powerful. Right. But I don't want to take up too much time because I'll be speaking about all of this at the next convention and how all of that has been updated. But as you can see, any of these images are provocative and detailed and interesting in ways that theater practitioners would be able to use to have conversations about a production. And the sooner you can get to something to look at that is representative of the synthesis of ideas, both in your own mind and amongst your colleagues, then the sooner you can benefit from a real understanding of things that can be quite challenging to visualize. And one of the strengths of generative AI is putting more than one idea together in a way that's surprising, but because it's trained on images that people have chosen to put on the internet, almost always are compelling and elegant or meaningful or stimulating in some kind of a fashion. But AI now is starting to be useful for actually making things that we could use, whether it's a tiling pattern that you could print out on fabric or use in a model or something like that, or whether it's any kind of crazy art. I also spoke at that time about how I took this rough Photoshop collage that I had made and use a tool called ControlNet, which can generate a depth map of something that never really had any depth. It can imagine what that depth map could be, and then you could generate versions of your ideas, which is incredibly powerful, just to be able to say, what if it was this, but it was French, or it was 19th century, or it was red, right? And another way it's incredibly powerful is we can have a napkin sketch in a meeting with a collaborator and generate something from that that is much more compelling, that we can either reject or carry further or alter very, very quickly. And so we could take a fashion photograph that we find compelling, that a director might find, generate a depth map, and then generate further images. And these are quite old. These are from 6 to 8 months ago. And so the quality that we can generate now is much, much higher, but you can see how you can take an idea and be able to create imagery that is compelling far beyond the time you would want to spend on painting something of this detail. And so today I'm using AI to generate all kinds of things. I did a simple 3D model of this arcade cabinet, but I used Midjourney to generate all of the artwork that's on it, both on the painting of the cabinet and on the screen. And so instead of spending an untold amount of time sort of sketching and drawing and painting something, which I might very well do if we were to go on to with this exact concept, I was able to put something together that could be representative of a final product in less than an hour, right? So today we're getting into new AI tools that could be very useful for actually using them on stage. For video and projection design, they're able to make videos from images that were generated from text. This is Runway, a new tool that uses images you might generate in itself or in Stable Diffusion, as Shawn mentioned, or in Midjourney, and you can make simple videos with it. But people are doing quite incredible things with it. Some of these are a little pixelated, sorry. But once we can generate dynamic content that's not just a still image, we could use this in many, many meaningful ways. Here's a funny one. You can see that it's really not there yet as a final product. But if you watch some of the other ones that are out there, AI-generated movies and shorts are coming, and AI-generated video projection content is coming. And another wonderful thing that we could do is, you saw how we could take a sketch and generate an image. Well, today I saw this tool for the first time. It's called Genie by Luma AI, and they can take an image or a text description and generate a 3D asset. So this isn't just a video, this is actually a 3D model that you could 3D print, that you could put into a digital rendering of a model or a pre-visualization sequence. And so the idea that any of us could do a sketch that would lead to, without any further work, a 3D asset that could be used far beyond the time you've invested in it is incredibly useful. I don't make hand-built models anymore at all. I make 3D renders in Blender, and I can generate really beautiful photorealistic scenes that I can share with directors and other producers. But that takes just as long as making a model, if not just as long. And so being able to generate assets, to generate a chair might take me an hour, to generate it with something like this might take me 5 minutes. So all of this is to say that this is developing incredibly rapidly. And as it becomes refined and as it becomes more useful to us, we should stay on top of it as something that doesn't hold us back, but actually empowers us to get to what we're capable of and the most amazing synthesis of our collaboration that's possible faster and easier, because we set a deadline, that's when the show opens, and we run out of time every time. And so the more we can do sooner, the more control we actually have. So I like to see all of this as just a tool that we can use for ourselves. And I think that's it. Yeah.
Awesome. That was those are some great examples. And I think some of the tools you were using, Jason, I was just scribbling them down, but Midjourney, and is it Runway or Runaway is the new one that
Yeah,
you're working?
Runway is generating video content and Genie is generating 3D assets, but it's changing every day. It's just incredible.
Yeah. So, in understanding that and talking about it, I think from your perspective as a creator, in asking Shawn, and please, again, everybody in the room, if you got questions, throw them out there. How can creatives protect their work in terms of what you create in this way? Shawn, and just looking at some of the things that Jason just showed us, what of that would be able to be protected, and in what way? Is it intellectual property? Do you copyright it? How do you approach that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and let me let me give you a bit of an example. So I did an article for Bloomberg Law where I sort of walked through a different hypothetical, and I said, well, let's imagine, and I used ChatGPT as an example, but I said, let's imagine I put into ChatGPT, write a story about a girl riding a bike. Okay. And I told it to make it 2,000 words, and it spit out a 2,000-word story about a girl riding a bike. That story is certainly not protectable. It's not able to be protected under United States copyright law. If I went back in and said, change the scene to New York, and the girl is actually riding her bike to her grandmother's house in order to talk about, moving to Georgia. It's a rainy day, and she's going to, Upper Manhattan. Okay. And then it rewrites the story and it changes all those elements. Is that enough? But has there been enough human creativity injected into the story to make it protectable now? We don't know. We don't know the answer to that. What I do, my inclination as to where this is going to go is, how much human creativity is there when I hold up my iPhone and I point it over there at the wall and I take a picture? I mean, how much human creativity? It doesn't feel like much. I mean, the camera's doing most of the work, and I go in and I pick out a setting, and I'm able to put a filter on it, and maybe I decide a few things, but the camera's doing all the work, and the camera's just a tool, right? And so, won't it be the case that these AI tools are just like other types of tools that we use? I mean, when I sketch out on my iPad and I make changes to a picture, well, if you look at a pixel level, the iPad's doing most of the work. So I don't know where this line is, Laura, and that's not a satisfying answer to hear from a person that's supposed to be a copyright expert, but we just don't know yet. And the courts are ruling on this and looking at this in a lot of different contexts.
All right, I appreciate that, and this is that wilder west of where we are and process. So I've got two questions in the Q&A. The first one is, are AI detectors moving as fast as the generators? And how would anyone know if a story or a work of art was AI generated?
Yeah, most of the AI detectors are BS. I mean, they don't work. They're not real. There is last week, President Biden put into place an executive order on artificial intelligence. One of the things in the executive order was around the FTC looking at pushing companies to develop tools in order to detect synthetic materials. In other words, materials or works that were created with artificial intelligence. The only way to reliably do that now is for the AI generators to put in some sort of watermarking where they're able to be detected that it was actually generated using artificial intelligence. They're not really doing that yet. There's a few tools that have contemplated this, but even if you go to OpenAI's website right now and look at the FAQs, there's an FAQ about are third-party tools able to determine if a particular piece of text was generated using ChatGPT? And the answer is no, that none of these tools are reliable because, again, they are mimicking human creativity. Like by their fundamental nature, they've been trained on an organization of words and phrases created by humans. And so, like, is there any way to reliably tell if it was a computer that generated or a human that generated? No, not yet, but there likely will be in the future. And
Okay.
if you think about images, for example, we could easily watermark that with some sort of indicator that it was created not only with artificial intelligence, but exactly what tool created it.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. There's one that's in our chat, which I think is interesting. I'm generating images using the playwright's stage directions. Hypothetically, who owns these images? Related question, I'm generating songs based upon elements in the playwright's text. Could these be copywritten? The playwright's been dead since 1890 and the play was written in the 1850s.
Yeah. So the answer is the author is the owner. And so, like, unless it is a derivative work, a direct derivative work of a previously protectable copyright, the author is the owner. So the human that is either typing on the keyboard or drawing with the pen, or like whoever that human is the owner of the copyright, unless for public policy reasons it's not otherwise protectable.
Okay. And I mean, that falls, if the original stuff that they're basing this off of falls well within outside of the 75-year copyright law, they should be. Okay.
That's right.
Okay, cool. Has an AI tool been developed that can take the image that was AI created, design elevation, and process the design into construction details, working drawings? Jason, you started to answer this in typing, but you can go ahead and answer publicly.
Yeah, I just started typing away. So no, that would be a multi-step process. There's a lot of AI, machine learning is a better term, around BIM data, building information management, around like taking a 3D asset and automatically generating the support structure for 3D printing it and things like that. There's a lot of machine learning around that, mostly related to simulations and digital twins, which is an area that I also work in. But as far as turning something into flats that you could create, especially for our unique process in theater, related to the process in film as well, of course, not at all. There's probably not enough demand right now for it to be a primary area of working, but it's also probably inevitable that it would be possible. It would just be a multi-step process that would involve text to image, image to depth, depth to 3D asset, and then getting that into some sort of a software that would understand this would be the weight of this thing, and this is how much support it would need, and you could flat face it, sculpt, or whatever. But it's really just that final part of the process that's not there, because there's probably not vast commercial demand for it yet. But it's inevitable. All the know-how is there for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll let you finish if you want to type anything else on that one before I move that one. The next question that we have is, are there tools for artists who are concerned about using AI that have been ethically trained, not trained on copyrighted or private content?
I'm only chuckling a little bit at the quote ethically trained. It's a bit of a buzzword that's sort of going around. I'd be interested what ethic we're talking about. whether or not it's been, are these tools violating intellectual property rights is really the question. And I could make an ethical argument that, countries like China that copy our intellectual property, but are able to, quickly utilize it and get, technology or creative material out to the masses so more of humanity can, enjoy that type of creative material. Is that ethical or not? I mean, they've stolen it, but is there a positive element to distributing it widely to people that may not have the money to otherwise buy it, or can get a cheaper version of it? So, I'm gonna ignore the ethics piece of the question, because I think it's not quite as clear cut ethically as people may spin it to be. But what I'll say is it is unclear as to whether or not tools that have been trained on copyrighted material and the output of those tools, whether or not they are a derivative work and therefore are owned by the original artist, or is making a copy of that problematic and violating the original copyright. Those are questions we don't know the answer to. What I will say is that what we do know is that these technologies don't copy. They ingest information and they create relations. And then when there is a prompt type, it is generating a completely new thing based on what it was trained upon. And so the critical elements of a copyright case is that you must copy. And I can get a technology expert up on the stand and prove that it was not copied. And so in order for the theory to win out, that these are derivative works of the underlying materials, and therefore any copies would violate copyright law, you have to come up with the theory that comes to the conclusion that there has been copying, and that's hard to do. It's not impossible, because there are some theories out there that it might play out, but it's a big question. And I did another article talking about this point called "The Ins and Outs," and the input training question is a really interesting one. So for example, I talked about the story of a girl riding a bike. Well, I could also do this. Hey, ChatGPT, write me a coming age story of Harry Potter in the style of J.K. Rowling's, and it would output a story. Is that story a derivative work of J.K. Rowling's materials? I think it is. And I think there could be a very strong legal case that has violated her copyright. But that I have narrowed the question now to a very small set of works that it could pull from, and specifically directing it to do it in the voice of J.K. Rowling. If I just said, hey, write a story about a wizard, and it pulled some from J.K. Rowling and some from the other, 1,000 authors that have written about a wizard, even though it utilized some of the underlying material of J.K. Rowling, that is probably fair use, and a copyright case would probably not prevail.
Interesting. Okay. It's a great example. I think that helps me understand even a little better. So yeah, and the question around the word ethical is a big one, I know, in so much of this. Another question is that, there's a belief, this is a question / statement, but there's a belief that until someone can monetize an output, it isn't worth the challenge to protect it. That our coverage in using this tool to access the images generated by others. In other words, I can steal the work of others until such time as I start making significant money that threatens the originator.
Yeah, there's a bit of truth. There's a bit of truth to that statement. I do think there are organizations and authors out there that are, really challenging this issue and are doing it on the grounds of protecting all creatives. And we are going to know more about this in the next few months. We've had some authors that have brought challenges. We've had artists that have brought challenges. Getty Images has brought a case against Stable Diffusion. There are a number of cases that are floating through the federal courts right now that we're going to get an outcome on this. I'm going to go back to the prior question, Laura, where a person asked, like, is there a tool that we could utilize that was not trained on third-party copywriting materials that you could sort of support? And what I'll say is there are a lot of So, for example, I did a deal with Shutterstock, and Shutterstock has partnered with an AI tool where that tool is only trained on Shutterstock images. And when you generate an image with that tool, a portion of the revenue goes back to the authors of the images it was used to create the output on, right? So those type of initiatives are being undertaken right now. And, I think we're going to see all sorts of interesting business models about royalties that are going back to the proper creators.
Yep. I have one more and we're coming close to our wrap up, but somebody asked, what about using copywritten material to train an AI system? The result is in a different entity. So, Brecht copied Beggar's Opera for 3 penny, but it is a very different piece. So what is the use of copywritten material to train the AI system?
Yeah. All of the training of these AI systems have been on copywritten material in large part. Like, if you think about the internet, most of the internet is material that's otherwise protectable by copyright. And so, again, a reminder, in order to have copyright protection, you don't have to register for the copyright. It automatically inures to the creator. In order to bring a lawsuit, you have to go through a registration, but that's more of an administrative process. And so, nearly all of these tools, if not all of these tools, have been trained on previously copyrighted materials.
Okay. Last thing, Jason, as somebody who has really worked with and used so much of this, technology, what is your biggest concern about intellectual property and what tools are you using currently to protect stuff that you've created?
I'm not using any tools to protect it right now. Just as when I would do a set design in the past, how can we? Like there were copyright cases about people stealing designs, high school musical producers stealing Broadway designs or choreography. There's constant copyright violations throughout all industries, but performance industries for sure. I'm not sure how to do that. I think it'll sort itself out. As Shawn said, that it's still very much a live thing that's in development, and everything that Shawn said makes sense to me. And I think that all of those different factors are being considered by a lot of different smart people who it will be figured out. But there's a broad understanding that the artist or any creator has rights that have to be protected, whether that's their work is being used or whether they've used AI or some other tool to generate something, right? I would have to license a photo from Getty if I wanted to use a stock image in a projection design or something as part of the final product. Where we've blurred the lines now between I learned by looking at many images because I went to a museum and then I created something of my own versus some of those pixels may have made it through to the final thing. Who knows? It's gotten quite blurry. I think that's where we all stand. But it's so incredibly powerful that for individuals, it's amazingly powerful to further our collaborations and make them quicker. And for companies, it'll be a no-brainer because they'll save money. But what I will say is that whenever this happens to an industry and it's disrupted like this, usually that industry grows. So we should see is people who are up on technological skills should have more job opportunities and more opportunities to create more powerfully.
Yeah. Well, that is a fantastic way to wrap this up. I thank you both for that. And I think you're absolutely right. You know, when technology continues to move and advance where we are in this art form and where we are in the world. So anyone who would like to reach out to or have any other questions for Jason or Shawn, you know, we have their contact information. I'm sure they will be happy to answer any follow-up questions. I'm volunteering you right now, voluntolding you, but I know you both mentioned that. And we will we'll do some cleanup edits on the webinar, but we'll definitely have this available for all of you for a period of time after this, and we'll let you know when that's out there. Highly recommend everyone come to our conference in March in Seattle, Washington, where you can hear Jason Jamerson continue this discussion and show you more ways to make this happen. Gentlemen, thank you both so much for being here with us today. Really, really helpful.
Of course, thank you all.
That's great.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.